Kaiser with ClearanceJobs.com and the delightful Katie Keller with ClearanceJobs.com. We have not done a LinkedIn Live or all the streaming places we're streaming this live. We always get the most comments from LinkedIn, so we appreciate the folks who join us there. I wanted to talk about our latest white paper because it's very relevant to the community that usually joins us for these live sessions, and it is about your top recruiting problems and how to solve them. It was Katie's white paper debut. Although she's contributed so much content over the years and articles, it's hard to keep track. But I think you posted that and said it was your first white paper you've done for us. And like pulling in your expertise as a recruiter and talking about recruiting problems. So maybe talk about some of the ideas that went into the white paper about your top recruiting problems. What was your creative inspiration for your top recruiting problems and how to solve them, Katie?
Sure. I mean, so we're just getting into fall, but candidate ghosting is any time of the year problem. So I know that candidates still continue to ghost, and I think candidates on this thread are going to say that recruiters ghost. So it is a problem that happens on both ends, but there are strategies in place or that you can put into your recruitment teams in terms of length in between communication. Actually, I will give a little anecdote. I did get a message from a cleared candidate, and they were talking about how recruiters try to get their messages out because they're tracking how many messages they send to candidates. So they were trying to get their messages out on a Friday, and it was clearly copied and pasted to a bunch of different candidates. And when this cleared candidate messaged back and said, "Oh yeah, I might be interested. Can you tell me a little bit more about the position?" It took the recruiter a couple of days to send their response back. And their response was, "Well, my hiring manager is out for the rest of the week." And it's like, you don't have a job rec to send that candidate. It took you a couple of days just to say that. So candidate ghosting, I know, is a huge problem, but I feel like recruiters can, keep timely communication in sort of their back pocket, and with that communication, having all of the information at hand for candidates.
Oh yeah, the waiting game is real. I think on both sides. I mean, I think that's what we kind of talk about with recruiting today, right? That speed is kind of the coin of the realm. So again, if you're joining us, thank you for all the questions and comments that we're getting in so far. Clearly the chat is already hot candidates right there in the chat, letting us know what jobs they're looking for. We're talking about our most recent white paper about top recruiting problems. And you did a little history lesson at the beginning, which is a bit of a history buff. I loved that. So we always think about like, this is the hardest it's ever been in terms of cleared hiring. But you kind of talk about this whole notion of defense industry recruiting kind of came into being around World War II. And there was always an issue then. So why the walk down history lane as you started the white paper? Where did you get that nugget, or why did you decide to do that?
I mean, I think it's just important to note that like the staffing industry, it has been in place it's still under a century, but staffing is not a new sort of industry. And so I think it's just interesting that we still have these issues in recruitment and staffing, even though it has been in place for a good amount of time. And I don't think a lot of people know that. So, I'm not a history buff like you probably, Lindy, but I think it is important to note like where staffing came from, and, giving tribute to sort of like the war fighter, and obviously the cleared game we're trying to reach the war fighter. So,
yeah.
So
well, I mean, it all comes together, right? Because we're talking about we're gonna have to stop talking about our 20th anniversary soon, because we're gonna be 21, Katie. Woo! Clearance job. If she's got her box. I don't know what we're gonna do for our 21st birthday. We should have. I'm expecting a bottle of wine or something to celebrate.
I was gonna say we could do some secret squirrel wine.
21st birthday. But our 20th anniversary, and we kind of have talked about the origin story of ClearanceJobs coming to being around, post 9/11. Evan and Rachel Lesser wanting to kind of seeing this need for staffing, that they experience at their own workplaces. So very reminiscent of what you saw in the post-World War II era, where we're trying to staff, we're building up the defense industrial complex and trying to figure out like, how do we structure our workforce? How do we hire better? And I do think we reach these critical inflection points, right? Every so often. So probably post World War II, certainly, the drawdown from the Cold War, certainly then build up with 9/11. Now we see that with COVID and remote work that we're kind of like in this kind of rejiggering kind of process in terms of what we're looking at for the cleared workforce. But it is challenging. Like anybody who works in recruiting knows, like, so I asked, in the description here, like, it's okay to vent. This is a safe space, people. So kind of talk about what are some of your top recruiting problems, what are some pain points, and we would love to hear that at Clearance Jobs. Because Katie, you're writing a weekly article specific to recruiters with a lot of tactical tips and great information. We also have a newsletter, the Cleared Advisor, that goes out every month. So if you're not subscribed to that, drop us a note. We would love to add you to that list. We're producing a lot of content to help recruiters, a lot of that coming from you, Katie. But kind of talk about maybe, I don't know if you want to walk through all 5 pain points that you outlined, or maybe 1 or 2 that really resonate, but like kind of top recruiting pain points today. And again, folks in the chat, I would love to hear some of your biggest pain points. We already talked about ghosting candidates, recruiters, timelines, but you had a few others in the white paper too, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, so I finished my recruiting stint about 3 years ago when I joined Clearance Jobs, and I think there are even more issues that recruiters are dealing with than I have experience dealing with. But one of my biggest things that I never did, and I know it's so important, or at least teams tell me it's important now, is what different data that you track as a recruiter. But I think even like drawing down a little bit more from that, like you can track all the data you want, but the data needs to be specific to your team. It needs to be specific to your company size. It needs to be specific to the amount of openings that you even have, or whether those openings are funded positions or proposal positions. I mean, so I think tracking data is a huge thing, but tracking the right data is a huge thing. So I think those are a few issues within recruitment teams. And then another, everybody experiences it. You don't have to be a recruiter to experience this, but toxic workplaces. I think having a recruiting team that has good morale, that isn't fighting over candidates internally within their applicant tracking system. I know the recruiting team has to function properly, and they have to be working as a team. Like I said, recruiters are very competitive, but that competition should not be happening so much within your recruiting team, I think is another problem.
Hi, back at you, Raquel. I like the first name's Katie. I had it in my head. I know how to pronounce your name, but I'm not going to try it again. I'm the John Travolta of names. This is why they allow me to moderate webinars, just so they can watch me. I don't know what's in this cup. It says, "Hey there, pumpkin." It's fall themes in honor of our fall themes. Hey there, pumpkin. Hey, I'm just going to call everybody on the chat pumpkin because I can pronounce that word. But back at you, Virginia. I can pronounce that. I wanted to go back to the chat because Colton said this. I thought this would be a great thing to unpack. Colton's talking about the biggest problem is getting into the recruiter's field of view. I feel like that is that's why, I advocate for Clearance Jobs, just because it is a more closed, community. There's not so much chatter. It is hard to get noticed. I think on Clearance Jobs, it's a little bit easier to get in the field of view of a recruiter. But maybe what are some of your tips for that, Katie? How do they catch your eye? Like, hey, recruiter, catch your view.
I mean, I think that in any sort of professional relationship, you need to advocate for yourself and talk a little bit more about what you bring to the table, but how you're going to help that recruiter. So getting into a recruiter's field of view, it just might be that they don't have a position for you yet. So maybe even from a candidate's perspective, maybe you don't have a position for me yet. Do you have a fellow recruiter at your company that does? Or would you be willing to do a shout out talking about my skill set to your other sort of recruiting connections? So, I mean, recruiters, Clearance Jobs Connect, I'm sure we'll talk about it. But recruiters do crave interaction with other recruiters at other companies. So just talking about your skill set and what you bring to the table, but maybe just thinking outside the box in terms of, sorry, the chat's like, there's so many
blowing
people.
Up. I'm watching you, Katie. You just keep talking. I'll watch the chat.
No, yeah, but I mean, again, just like asking if maybe they have a recruiting connection that has something for you, because it could just be, I mean, recruiters are very busy, but it could just be that they don't have something for you yet. But yeah, I mean, and I don't think there's any harm in continually pinging a recruiter if they don't respond to you.
Yeah.
It could
Well,
just
I
be that
mean,
they're
I
busy.
I don't mind the aggressive. I mean, I think we know when it gets too far. Like, I just think there's just, like, if you're just creepy, you're creepy. I mean, you probably can't
Right.
help it. But somebody who is persistent, that's what I say today. Like, the persistent pursuit of something, I take that as like passion, because my inbox is a nightmare. I always say it's terrible, and I feel terrible about it. But I just get so many messages coming in. Sometimes it is like the person who follows up gets the response, because then it's the top of my inbox, where unfortunately it just keeps going down, 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 and I forget
Right.
about it. And if I was a better person, and think about in the world of recruiting, where so you're getting so many messages coming in. So I think that's where that has. But I love your takeaway in terms of like putting stuff out there, because I love that story of that. I was like, how we found you, Katie, because you like shared content, and you're like, so
Right.
building your personal brand. We talk about employer branding a ton, but I think candidate branding is the same way. Like, if you are
Right.
trying to get the attention of a recruiter, thinking about what is my candidate personal brand, like what is my expertise, can I curate, find content, share it using both your ClearanceJobs profile, your social media profiles, all of that together to like kind of demonstrate who you are, and then that will catch somebody's eye as much as like, hey, got a job. I mean, that's just, I mean, recruiters have jobs, but that does not give them a lot to work with.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing. Like, I attended a job fair this week, and candidates, hey, got a job for me? Well, like, you can maybe
Be more
explain,
specific.
yeah, like be a little more specific, talk about what you're looking for, and maybe do some of your own research. I mean, people are busy, but so with candidate branding, I mean, I think the same goes with recruiter brand. Like, we do talk about employer brand a lot, but as a recruiter, like in such a digital world that we live in, you have to have your own brand if you're personally reaching out to candidates. Like, you have to post content. You have to sort of do that first touch to candidates before you do the hard sell. And I know that we talk about the recruiting funnel a lot. Personal brand on the recruiter's end goes a lot into that as well.
Yeah. And then somebody had asked there just like more specific resume advice about, hey, I had to leave a job for personal reasons. Should I indicate that? I think there is a lot more flexibility today. We talk a ton about how the defense industry is trying to be really proactive about mental health and other reasons. So if you have to take a leave of absence, or if there are pivot points in your career due to personal reasons, whatever those are, I feel like, I mean, recruiters are people. They are pretty responsive to that. I don't think that that's going to be, for me, that's not the most important part of your story. So I don't
Yeah.
think you really need to, overemphasize it. But I also feel like you don't need to be ashamed of having that, or indicating like, hey, I had to take a leave of absence for family reasons or things like that. I mean, a lot of people have done that in COVID. Do you have any other like maybe practical tips for somebody who is wondering about, nervous about leave of absence or family issues, and how that works on the resume?
I mean, yeah, like you said, I don't think that should be the biggest thing that a candidate worries about. I think if you, I mean, coming from a cleared recruiting perspective, if you have the clearance and you meet the requirements, if you had to leave a position for personal reasons, that's not a big deal at all. If you meet those minimum requirements. And I mean, likewise, I remember a few years ago, there was a little bit of chatter on like professional networking sites like ClearanceJobs. If you shouldn't have like a family photo, it should just be a professional photo. And I feel like everything in terms of that chatter is totally changing. Like, employers understand that you have a personal life. They understand that you want work-life balance. And it also helps that like the ball is totally it's a candidate's market. But I think, yeah, things like that are totally changing within this industry, which I'm happy about. I think it was needed. So
Hey, hello, Biggie. I hope that's how you pronounce that name. But
Biggie.
Biggie. That's one I can
I
pronounce.
was just
Maybe.
listening to Notorious B.I.G. So
Hello.
I
I
like it.
might be on my Connect playlist. We can plug Connect. We are
Yeah.
down to the wire, people. If you have not registered for Connect, our recruiting conference, there's a ton of recruiters in the chat here. This is your last chance, people. We will probably sell out tickets. So I'd want to make sure folks have the chance to participate and join. So Connect is next week on Wednesday. What is time? I was like, oh, it's coming. The agenda is stacked. The speakers are incredible. We're going to talk about employer branding. Evan Lesser, founder and president of ClearanceJobs, is going to be there. DCSA, ton of great speakers. Odie and we all are going to talk clearances. We're going to talk recruiting. Eric Eversole, hiring our heroes. So if you are interested in some practical recruiting tips, that is a great time to get those. Anything else on Connect, Katie?
I'm totally stoked for it. Recruiters rarely get the venue to ask questions of the government, or we've been discussing it, just being able to talk about some of their challenges within the industry and maybe plant the seed of what needs to change in the security clearance process, because the security clearance process is so important to cleared recruiting. And that's what makes our market so tough and so great too. But it's just a really great venue for recruiters to get together with security professionals and sort of talk about the problems at where those processes intersect. So I'm just totally pumped for it. I'm totally pumped for our lineup. Like you said, the agenda is stacked. So if you don't have a ticket, you need to get it today, because it's going to be.
And Diana asked another practical question, and this is because I feel like we've written about this. I hear conflicting information a little bit about this. Do you need a resume for each job that you apply for? Diane asks that. From your recruiter perspective, talk a little bit about the resume tailoring.
Yeah, I think that for every job you apply for, you should be tweaking your resume a bit. I don't think those tweaks need to be huge, and they shouldn't be huge, because you shouldn't be applying to positions that are so outside your wheelhouse that you're having to update your resume so much. But yes, I do think when you're applying to a position, you do want those keywords in there. Recruiters are very busy, so they are using, Boolean or keyword searches in terms of looking for candidates and making sure that the resume matches requirements. So yeah, I do think you need to tailor it, but you shouldn't be applying to positions where they're not there.
If you have, how many different resumes do you have? It's kind of like tweaking it. It's kind of like maybe you're like, if you have like a mission statement or a skill summary statement, maybe you're tweaking some of those based on the specific position, but you should be able to kind of have a framework and then you tweak it. But because sometimes I feel like people walk around and I have like 45 different resumes. Like, well, you have one resume, but you're just like, you're just updating it for
right.
Submitting it into a new applicant tracking system.
Well, and I don't think you need to like save 45 resumes onto your PC, people. Like, you can just
I don't know. Have you seen all the documents saved onto my PC? Katie, it's a nightmare. It's like my inbox, only more sad, full of sad documents that I'll never find. So we've had a few people. If you're coming to Connect, do a shout out. We would love to connect with you prior to Connect. See what I'm doing there? All the connections. So connect with us prior to Connect. Connect with Katie and I. Let us know that you're going to be there. We would love to be able to look for you or know that you're going to be there. Again, a lot of folks talking about the current cleared market and industry. Somebody asked about polygraphs. Do I need a polygraph? The polygraph is like a very small subset of the cleared community. If you have a polygraph, that is a highly coveted credential, of course, to have, especially within ClearanceJobs. A lot of folks are searching for those, super secret squirrel positions, but not having a polygraph is definitely not a barrier to a cleared job. I think a lot of IC positions will require it eventually. But if you get on board with the IC, they will actually sponsor through that process. I don't know, any other thoughts on the clearance levels or polygraph?
Yeah, I think if you are like in the market to get a polygraph and you don't have one as a candidate, there are certain agencies where it's easier to get scheduled for that polygraph. But I know I just wrote about this at ClearanceJobs when I was up at Fort Meade a few weeks back. I was talking with a few cleared recruiters, and polygraphs are still a problem for them, and just finding those candidates who currently have one. Or I think polygraphs, even transferring agency to agency, is becoming more of a problem, which was never a problem when I was recruiting. But so yeah, if you have a polygraph as a candidate, recruiters are looking for you. So
yeah, it's definitely an in-demand skill set, but not a requirement. And I do think more companies are able to sponsor clearances too. So if you're coming into this and you don't have a clearance, The processing times have improved, and there's just a need for new candidates to get through the door. So if you have the skills, like I say, I feel like we started. This is like, well, welcome to all my conversations. Katie's like, what are we talking about today? I was going to talk about.
I was just looking. We've been talking for 20 minutes.
We've been talking about candidate stuff, but we love recruiters too. But we got to help out who's in the chat. I love to help the people, Katie, who are asking questions in the chat. But if you are a recruiter, in the description for this video, there's a link to download Katie's white paper, Your Top Recruiting Problems and How to Solve Them. There are a lot of actionable tips. And I will say, I feel this churn of like, it's in recruiting, it's in sales, where you have all these kind of cycle positions. It's hard to pour into professional development, and like you get kind of stuck in the same spin cycles, and it's easy then to burn out. So infusing a few new ideas into your team, or taking the time to read a white paper, again, subscribe to our newsletters, investing a little bit in yourself and your professional, personal development, I think can go a long way in energizing you, because otherwise you kind of end up doing the same thing, right? And,
Totally.
all of us do that in our jobs, but I think recruiting, especially because you're kind of chasing all of these metrics and cycles. So, download the white paper, check it out. Anything else, Katie, that we didn't chat about?
No, I mean, recruiters, I know how tough you have it. I love you. I'm sorry, but download the white paper, because yes, agreed, Lindy. We tend to get in these mantras, and I think, get energized, read a white paper, gather some new tips, and come to Connect.
Perfect. That's how we end it. Come to Connect 2022. You will see us there if you are not currently registered and you are a cleared candidate in the DC Metro. You should be at Connect. Did I say candidate or recruiter? I meant recruiter. Don't listen to the word. I talk too fast, and then I don't hear the words, and then I catch them later sometimes. I'm like, I said it wrong. Did I say it right? It's like when I say people's names. If you're a recruiter, if you're a candidate, don't come to Connect. There'll be nothing there for you. You're not going to have a good time. I mean, you could see us, but it's not for you. We'll have another event for you. Give me your ideas. I'll have a candidate event for you. If you're a person,
we have tons of candidate job fairs, virtual career
events. You should attend our career events. And we're having more in-person career events next year. So 2023, candidates, you'll have a chance to meet us in person in 2023. Recruiters, you can meet us next week. Security officers as well. I haven't seen any security questions on the chat, but if you are a security officer, we have a lot of security content there. You are welcome as well. But next week is not a career event. Well, that's like my disclaimer. These opinions are not those of the government or ClearanceJobs.com.
It's just us. Our opinions.
It's just me. Katie's opinions are of ClearanceJobs.com, but nobody wants me to say that. Okay, on that note, come to Connect. Thank you again, everyone. Hey, Kevin's matchmaking events. Sign me up, Kevin. See you there. Thanks, Katie.